By now, you may have heard about the fight in Congress over the debt ceiling, but there's a really important thing to keep in mind here. This whole thing is stupid. The concept of the debt ceiling vaguely has its origins in the Constitution, which states that only Congress has the power to borrow on the credit of the United States. For the first century plus of the country, this meant Congress individually authorized each issue of debt the country had, until 1917, when more money was needed to fund World War I. So Congress passed a law giving the Treasury Department the authority to borrow money, but only up to a point. Thus, the first debt ceiling was born. In the century after, the debt ceiling was raised around 90 times, with increasing frequency over the years, including 18 times under Ronald Reagan, 8 times under Bill Clinton, and 7 times under George Bush. And there are a few instances of the issue becoming a partisan weapon. In 1995, then House Speaker Newt Gingrich made a brief show of threatening to use it to force spending cuts. In 2006, then Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid strategically slammed Republicans for raising it ahead of the midterms. But defaulting was never considered an actually serious threat, largely because it would be so destabilizing for the financial markets that it would probably cause a recession. Then came the Obama presidency, when, famously, congressional Republicans held the issue hostage to force spending cuts. That showdown ultimately ended hours before the country was set to default in a way most everybody hated. Spending cuts specifically designed to be painful, but no structural change to the country's finances and no tax increases. It also resulted in the first ever downgrading of the US credit system. During the Trump years, Republicans conveniently abandoned their demands over the debt ceiling and twice voted overwhelmingly to suspend it. Notably, Democrats near unanimously backed them without hostage-taking of their own. Now, the country is once again bordering on default. Technically, the ceiling was hit on July 31st, but the Treasury Department always deploys extraordinary measures to make up for Congress's bad timing, basically emptying its Venmo balance to patch over until payday, and has given Congress until October 18th to suspend or raise the ceiling. Side note, suspending is different than raising. Raising the ceiling is just specifying a new, higher number for it to be. Suspending is saying it's no longer in effect for a certain period of time. Now, faced with the Republican Party once again determined to make it as difficult as possible to raise the ceiling, despite the fact that around 90% of the debt that caused it to need to be raised at all was accumulated under Trump, many Democrats in Washington, and others outside, are wondering whether they should permanently end the issue. And they have a point. The United States is the only country in the world that deals with this issue. The only other country that even has a debt ceiling is Denmark, and theirs is set so high that it's hard to even reach it. And we are now only flirting with default because even though a majority of Congress supports raising the ceiling, the United States is also the only developed country that requires a supermajority to pass legislation. In other words, American exceptionalism.